Sir, you have to pretend you're dead." The words came out of McKenna's mouth like a bomb she'd been holding in her chest for hours. They didn't sound real. Not even to her. Kieran Locke looked up from the file on his lap. Rain hammered against the glass walls of his penthouse bedroom. The city lights below blurred into streaks of gold and red. It was past midnight, the kind of hour when the world felt like it belonged to ghosts. He blinked at her, confused, tired, like he'd heard her wrong. "McKenna," he said slowly, voice low and careful. "What did you just say?" She stood in the doorway, her gray Maid uniform damp with sweat even though the air conditioning hummed cold around them. Her fingers gripped the doorframe so hard her knuckles went white. If she let go, she'd fall. She was sure of it. "Please, sir," she whispered, stepping inside and closing the door gently behind her, like the walls had ears, like someone was already listening. "You need to pretend you're dead. Tonight. Before they kill you for real." Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. A chill slid down Kieran's spine. He set the file aside, his jaw tightening. Who is they? McKenna swallowed hard. Her throat felt like sandpaper. Her eyes were shining, but not from tears, from fear, from something bigger than fear. "Someone close to you," she said, her voice shaking now. "Someone who knows your schedule. Someone who knows exactly how you breathe when the panic starts." Thunder rolled outside, deep and low, like the sky was cracking open. Kieran's chest tightened, his pulse kicked up. He'd had panic attacks before, bad ones, the kind that made him feel like his ribs were closing in on his lungs. But only a handful of people knew that. His doctor, his therapist, his assistant. His mind started spinning through names, faces, voices. "McKenna," he said again, his tone harder now. "Tell me who." She opened her mouth, closed it. Her hands were trembling at her sides, and instead of giving him a name, she said something that made his blood go cold. "To understand that, sir," she whispered, "you need to know why I'm really here." The room went silent except for the rain. Kieran stared at her, really stared. For the first time since she'd started working in his house 3 months ago, he looked at her like she wasn't just the woman who brought him tea. He looked at her like she was a stranger, a threat, a puzzle he should have solved weeks ago. "What do you mean?" he asked slowly. McKenna's lip trembled. She stepped closer to the bed, close enough that he could see the exhaustion carved into her face. The kind you don't get from one sleepless night, the kind that builds over time, over loss, over rage. "I didn't come here to clean your floors," she said quietly. "I didn't come here to fold your sheets or make your coffee or smile when you walked past me in the hallway." His breath caught. "Then why?" he asked. She looked him dead in the eyes, and the answer she gave him wasn't what he expected. It was worse. "I came here because I wanted to watch you suffer," she said. "I came here because someone convinced me you deserved it. And I came here because I thought, maybe if I got close enough, I could be the one to make sure you never hurt anyone again." Kieran felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "But now," she continued, her voice cracking, "the people who sent me here are about to do something I never signed up for, and if you don't listen to me right now, you're going to die tonight." Thunder cracked again. Louder this time. Kieran's hands curled into fists on the bed. "Who sent you?" he demanded. McKenna's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "Someone you trust more than anyone else in this building," she said. And before he could ask another question, she added the thing that made his heart stop cold. "Someone who's been planning this long before I ever walked through your door." 3 months earlier, the penthouse had felt like a museum. Cold, quiet, full of things that looked expensive, but felt empty. McKenna had stepped off the elevator for the first time with her hands folded in front of her and her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The head housekeeper, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Patton, had walked her through each room like she was showing off a palace made of ice. Marble floors that clicked under their shoes. Tall ceilings with art that didn't make sense. Floor-to-ceiling windows half covered with curtains, like the man inside didn't trust the light. Everything was perfect. Nothing felt lived in. Kitchen there, laundry there. Never go into his office unless you're told, Mrs. Patton said, her voice clipped and businesslike. Mr. Locke doesn't like noise. He doesn't like surprises. And he doesn't like personal questions. McKenna had nodded, keeping her face blank. Professional. Forgettable. Does he like anything? She'd muttered under her breath. Mrs. Patton had sighed. His work, his ghosts maybe. Just do your job and you'll be fine. Fine. Fine didn't pay off hospital debt. Fine didn't bring Mama back. McKenna had kept her mouth shut and her eyes down, but inside her mind had been spinning. She'd been thinking of a small clinic in Atlanta with a faded sign over the door that read, Locke Foundation Community Health Center. Her mother's last workplace. The place that closed overnight without warning. The loss that sent Mama's heart into a spiral it never came back from. After the funeral, McKenna had searched the name behind that sign. Kieran Locke. The man whose decisions had rippled into her kitchen table. Into her bills, into her mother's grave. She'd stared at his face on her phone screen for hours. Rich, untouchable, smiling in some photos like he'd never hurt anyone in his life. And then one night, a message had appeared in her inbox from someone she didn't know. No profile, picture, no name, just a message that felt too specific to be spam. You want into his world? I can get you inside his house. Good pay, no questions. McKenna had stared at it for 3 days before she replied. She didn't ask who they were. She didn't ask why they wanted to help her. She just sent her resume and waited. 2 weeks later, she had the job. She told herself it was just about getting close, about learning who he really was, about making him see the faces behind the numbers he'd erased with a signature. But deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple. She wanted him to hurt. She wanted him to feel what she'd felt. She wanted him to know what it was like to lose everything because someone else decided your life didn't matter enough. If someone you loved died because of a signature on paper, would you forgive it? Or would you do what she did? McKenna didn't know the answer anymore, but she knew she wasn't the only one with a plan. The stranger who'd messaged her had stayed in touch. Short texts, calm instructions, always at night, always when McKenna was alone. Take your time, learn his routine, don't rush. McKenna had thought it was about revenge, about justice, about making sure Kieran Locke didn't get to live in peace while her mother was 6 feet under. But she didn't know the truth yet. She didn't know that the stranger wasn't some random activist or hacker with a grudge. She didn't know that the person pulling the strings was already upstairs, already in his life, already smiling at him every day. She didn't know that the real plan wasn't just to ruin his life. It was to end it. And McKenna, with all her anger and her grief and her need to make someone pay, had walked right into the middle of it without realizing she was just another piece on someone else's board. The day she started work, she'd stood in front of the mirror in the staff bathroom and whispered to herself, "This is for you, Mama. He's going to remember your name." But what she didn't whisper, what she didn't even let herself think, was the darker truth sitting heavy in her chest. She didn't just want him to remember, she wanted him gone, and someone out there was more than willing to help her make that happen. For the first 2 weeks, Kieran Locke moved like a ghost. Up before dawn, in his office all day, on calls late into the night. He ate alone at a table built for 12. He answered the staff with quiet nods, not barks. He passed McKenna in the hallway with a tired half smile that felt more like a reflex than kindness. He wasn't the loud, cruel monster she'd built in her head. He was quieter, scarier in a different way. McKenna had expected rage, arrogance, the kind of man who snapped his fingers and watched people scramble. But Kieran didn't snap. He barely spoke. He'd stand at the glass wall in his living room and stare down at the city like he was trying to remember something he'd dropped years ago and never picked back up. One evening, fireworks exploded outside. Some celebration downtown. Bright flashes of red and gold lit up the sky. Kieran flinched, not a little jump. A full-body flinch like someone had fired a gun next to his ear. McKenna had been dusting a shelf nearby. She'd seen it. Seen the way his shoulders pulled in, the way his breath caught, the way his hand went to his chest like he was checking if his heart was still beating. He didn't say anything, just walked out of the room. Another night she'd been restocking towels in the hallway when she heard a baby crying on the TV downstairs. Some commercial. Just background noise. Kieran had been walking past her. He stopped mid-step. Stood there for a long moment, staring at nothing. His jaw tight, his eyes somewhere else. Then he kept walking. McKenna didn't understand it. Didn't know what to do with it. She'd come here expecting to hate him more the closer she got. But hate needed fuel. And the man she was watching didn't feel like a villain. He felt like someone who'd survived something and didn't know how to live after it. One night, Mrs. Patton shoved a tray into McKenna's hands. "Take up Mr. Locke's tea, please. My back is done for today." McKenna's heart thudded. She'd avoided being alone with him as much as possible. It was easier to hate someone from a distance. She climbed the stairs, tray balanced in her hands, and knocked softly on his bedroom door. "Mr. Locke, it's McKenna. I brought your tea. Come in." She pushed the door open. He sat on the edge of his bed, suit jacket off, black t-shirt on, forearms bare. Up close, he didn't look powerful. He looked exhausted. There were faint scars on his forearms. Old ones. Thin white lines that looked like they'd been there for years. "Your tea," she said, handing it over. "Thank you, McKenna." He knew her name. She turned to leave, heart pounding harder than it should have been. "Wait." Her hand froze on the door handle. She turned slowly, pulse kicking up. Kieran was looking at her now, really looking. Not through her. Not past her. At her. "You're from Georgia," he said. It wasn't a question. McKenna blinked. "Yes, sir. Atlanta." "Your accent slips when you're tired," he murmured. His voice was soft, almost careful. "My mother was from Savannah." Something softened in his eyes when he said it. Not the eyes of a man who enjoyed breaking lives, the eyes of someone who missed something he couldn't get back. McKenna didn't know what to say. She hadn't expected this, hadn't expected him to notice her at all, let alone remember where she was from. "She used to make sweet tea," he continued quietly. "The kind that's so sweet it almost hurts your teeth. She'd say, 'If it doesn't make you wince, it's not Georgia tea.'" A small, sad smile pulled at the corner of his mouth. McKenna's chest tightened. This wasn't the conversation she'd imagined having with the man who'd killed her mother. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said, because she didn't know what else to say. He looked down at his tea. "I'm sorry for a lot of things." The words hung in the air between them. McKenna should have left, should have walked out and shut the door and reminded herself why she was there. But she didn't move. "Is there anything else you need, sir?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "No. Thank you, McKenna." She nodded and turned again toward the door, but just as her fingers touched the handle, he spoke again, and this time his voice was different. Quieter, almost vulnerable. "Do you ever feel like you're haunted by the things you didn't mean to break?" McKenna's breath caught. She didn't turn around, didn't trust herself to look at him. "Every day," she whispered. And then she left. But the question followed her all the way back to her room, because she realized something that night. The man upstairs wasn't just haunted by what he'd done, he was drowning in it. And for the first time since she'd stepped into his house, McKenna wasn't sure if she could go through with what she came here to do. McKenna found the photo on a Wednesday afternoon. She was dusting in Kieran's private library, a room she'd only been in twice before. Tall shelves packed with books that looked like they'd never been opened, a leather chair by the window, a desk covered in files and half-empty coffee cups. And tucked between two thick books on the middle shelf, a simple wooden frame. She almost missed it, but something about the image caught her eye. A building. A small crowd of people standing in front of it, smiling. The sun was bright. The sky was clear. McKenna stepped closer, her duster hanging loose in her hand. Her breath stopped. It was the clinic, the Locke Foundation Community Health Center in Atlanta. The same faded brick, the same crooked sign, the same front steps where McKenna used to sit after school, waiting for her mother to finish her shift, and there, off to the side, partially blurred but unmistakable, was her mother, in her nurse's uniform, hand resting over her name badge, smiling that soft, tired smile she used to wear at the end of a long day. McKenna's hands started shaking. She reached for the frame, her fingers trembling as she lifted it off the shelf. "Leave it." His voice came from behind her, sharp and sudden. McKenna jumped, almost dropping the frame. Kieran stood in the doorway, hair damp from rain, shoulders tense. He looked at her, then at the photo in her hands. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. "I didn't mean to startle you," he said quietly. "I just don't let people touch that one." McKenna's throat tightened. She held the frame out to him, her hand still shaking. He took it and stared at it for a long moment. His face softened, his jaw unclenched. He looked younger suddenly, like the weight he carried every day had lifted just a little. "You knew them?" McKenna whispered. "The staff there were different," he said quietly. "They weren't just doing a job. They cared. Really cared." He paused, his thumb brushing over the glass. "There was this one nurse who used to pack extra sandwiches and leave them in the staff fridge. She'd write little notes on them, for whoever forgot to eat. I lived on those for months." McKenna's chest ached. He smiled, small and sad. "She yelled at me once. I'd been there 3 days straight, trying to fix some grant paperwork. She walked into the office, slammed a plate down in front of me and said, 'You can't save anybody if you don't take care of yourself, baby.'" His voice cracked just a little on the word, baby. McKenna's eyes burned, her vision blurred. That was Mama. That was her voice, her words. The same thing she used to say to McKenna when she'd study too late or skip meals because money was tight. Kieran looked up at her, his brow furrowing. "Did I say something wrong?" McKenna shook her head quickly, blinking hard to keep the tears from falling. "No," she whispered. "No, you didn't." He studied her face, confused, concerned. "She sounds like she was a good person," McKenna added, her voice barely holding together. "She was," Kieran said softly. "She was one of the best people I ever met." He looked back at the photo. "I wish I could have done more. I wish I could have kept that place open. I wish I could have protected the people who worked there." His hand tightened around the frame. "But I didn't," he said. "And I've had to live with that ever since." Silence pressed in around them. McKenna didn't know what to say, didn't know how to hold all the anger and grief and confusion swirling inside her chest. Imagine hearing a stranger remember your mother better than the world ever did. Would you hate him? Or break? Kieran set the photo back on the shelf, his fingers lingering on the frame for just a second longer. Then he turned to her, his eyes softer than she'd ever seen them. "What was her name?" he asked gently. Makina's breath caught. The question hung in the air like a live wire. She opened her mouth to answer, but the truth jammed in her throat. Because if she said her mother's name out loud, if she told him who she really was, everything would change. The plan would fall apart. The stranger who'd sent her here would find out, and Makina didn't know what would happen after that. So instead, she swallowed hard and said the only thing she could think of. "I don't remember, sir. I'm sorry." It was a lie, and from the way Kieran's eyes searched her face, she wasn't sure he believed her, but he didn't push. He just nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "It's okay," he said quietly. "Sometimes we forget the names, but we never forget the way people made us feel." He walked past her toward the door, pausing just before he left. "Thank you for listening, Makina," he said. And then he was gone. Makina stood there alone, staring at the photo on the shelf. Her mother's face. Kieran's memories. The weight of a lie she couldn't take back. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice whispered the question she'd been avoiding since the day she walked into this house. What if the person she came here to destroy wasn't the monster she thought he was? That night, Makina sat on her narrow staff bed, staring at the photo on her phone. Mama. The clinic. The man who remembered her voice. Her chest felt tight. Her mind felt loud. She kept replaying the conversation in the library. The way Kieran had smiled when he talked about the sandwiches. The way his voice had cracked when he said the word baby. He wasn't supposed to remember her mother like that. He wasn't supposed to feel real. Her screen lit up suddenly, buzzing in her hand. Unknown number. Her stomach dropped. She already knew who it was. The message was short, simple, cold. "You've been inside for 2 weeks. Progress?" Makina stared at the words, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. She didn't want to reply, didn't want to tell the truth, because the truth was messy, complicated. The truth was that she didn't know what she was doing anymore, but she typed anyway. "He's not what I thought." The response came fast, too fast. "Call me, now." Makina's heart kicked hard against her ribs. She stood up, pacing her small room, phone pressed to her ear as it rang once, twice, then clicked. "You sound tired," the woman's voice said. Calm, controlled, the same voice that had messaged her weeks ago, the same voice that had promised her a way in. "I am tired," Makina said quietly. "Then rest after you finish what you started." Makina swallowed hard. "He remembers my mother." Silence. Then the woman spoke again, her tone sharper now. And he closed her clinic anyway," Makina snapped, her voice rising. "He went home to his penthouse. She went home to a stack of bills she couldn't pay." "Everyone has a story, Makina," the woman said coolly. "Don't let his make you soft." Makina's hand tightened around the phone. "I'm not soft. I'm just confused," the woman interrupted. "Second-guessing? Feeling sorry for a man who never felt sorry for the people he hurt?" Makina didn't answer. The woman's voice softened, but it didn't feel kind. It felt like a trap. "You remember why you're there, don't you?" she said. "You remember the debts, the funeral, the nights you screamed into your pillow because nobody was listening, the nights you sat on the floor of your apartment and wondered if anyone even cared that she was gone." Tears burned behind Makina's eyes. "I remember," she whispered. "Good," the woman said, "because you asked me for this chance. You begged me to help you get close to him, and I did. I gave you access, I gave you a plan. Now you want to walk away because he smiled at you and told you a nice story about sandwiches?" Makina's breath shook. "You want your pain to mean something?" the woman continued. "Then do what you came to do." Makina's throat tightened. "What if I can't?" "Then you were never serious to begin with," the woman said coldly. "And everything your mother went through was for nothing. The words hit like a punch. Makina's hand trembled, her pulse roared in her ears. "I need to see you," the woman said suddenly. "Face to face. No more hiding behind phones." Makina's stomach twisted. "When?" "Basement level," the woman said. "Service stairs. Thursday night, 1 a.m. "Why there?" Makina asked. "Because nobody goes down there at that hour," the woman replied. "And because we need to talk about what happens next. If you're in, you show up. If you're not, don't bother coming back to work Friday." The line went silent for a beat. 1 a.m., Makina, the woman repeated. "Don't make me wait." The call ended. Makina stood there in the middle of her room, phone still pressed to her ear, heart hammering so loud she could barely hear herself think. She looked at her reflection in the dark window across from her bed. A stranger stared back. Thursday was 2 days away. 2 days to decide if she was going to walk down those stairs and meet the person who'd brought her into this mess. 2 days to figure out if she could really go through with what she'd come here to do. But what Makina didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that the woman on the other end of that call wasn't some faceless stranger plotting from a distance. She was already upstairs, already inside Kieran's world, already sitting at his table, already holding his trust in the palm of her hand. And when Makina walked down those basement stairs on Thursday night, she was going to come face to face with the last person she ever expected to see. Someone Kieran believed in more than anyone else in his life. Someone who'd been planning this long before Makina ever showed up. And when that door opened, everything Makina thought she understood about revenge, about justice, about who the real villain was, would shatter into a million pieces. The basement always felt colder than the rest of the building. Makina slipped down the service stairs at exactly 1 a.m., her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Emergency strip lights painted the concrete walls in dull yellow. Staff lockers lined one side. Ahead, the secure door to the underground garage glowed with a red keypad. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly wishing she'd brought a jacket. Then a figure stepped out from the shadows near the lockers. Tall, sharp cheekbones, auburn hair pulled into a sleek knot, long black coat that looked more expensive than anything Makina had ever owned. Makina's breath caught in her chest. She knew that face. She'd seen it on magazine covers, on business blogs, in photos beside Kieran at charity galas and board meetings. Vivian Cross, his advisor, his public voice, the woman the press called the Ice Queen of Tech. "Hello, Makina," Vivian said, her real voice matching the one from the phone calls, smooth, controlled, cold. "Nice to finally meet you properly." Makina's legs felt like they might give out. "You?" she whispered. Vivian smiled, slow and sharp. "Surprised? You're V?" Makina's voice came out shaky, confused, angry. "You work for him. You're always with him. You—" "I know exactly what I am," Vivian interrupted. "And you think some random stranger could get you past my security? I hire everyone who steps foot in his private space. Including you." Makina's stomach twisted. Anger bubbled up hot and fast. "Why would you help me get close if you work for him?" Vivian's eyes hardened, and for the first time, Makina saw something real beneath the cold surface. Pain. Rage. The kind that had been sitting for years. "My father owned a manufacturing company," Vivian said quietly. "A good one. 60 employees. Family run for 3 generations. Then Kieran Locke made a deal with one of our suppliers. Undercut us. Locked us out. We couldn't compete. 6 months later, my father lost everything. The business. The house. His pride." Her voice didn't shake, but her jaw tightened. "He had a heart attack 2 weeks after we filed for bankruptcy," she continued. "Died in his office chair, staring at a screen full of red numbers." Makina's chest ached. "I joined Kieran's team because I needed to survive," Vivian said. "But I stayed to plan. I learned his routines, his weaknesses, his fears. And I waited. She stepped closer. "You're not the only one he hurt, Makina," she said softly. "You're just the one angry enough to help me finish what he started." Makina's mind was spinning. She didn't know what to feel. Sympathy? Fear? Disgust? Vivian reached into her coat and pulled out a small white envelope. "Inside is the end of his story," she said, holding it out. "You just have to decide if you're brave enough to write it." Makina stared at the envelope like it was alive. "What is that?" she asked, even though part of her already knew. "Insurance," Vivian said calmly. "A few drops in his tea, coffee, nightcap, whatever you want. It won't look like anything at first. Weeks from now, he'll collapse. Stroke, heart failure, whatever story we choose. But the autopsy will say natural causes, and no one will cry foul." Makina's hands started trembling. "You want me to poison him," she said. Vivian tilted her head. "I want you to finish what he started when he closed those clinics. He kills with signatures. You'll kill with teaspoons." She paused. "Call it justice, balancing the scales. Call it whatever helps you sleep, Makina." Makina's throat burned. "What if I say no?" Vivian's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Then I leak everything," she said softly. "Your messages, our calls, screenshots of payments with your name on them. Angry girl from Atlanta stalks billionaire who took her mother's job. You won't get another job in this city. Maybe not in this country." The basement seemed to shrink. Makina felt trapped, cornered, like the walls were closing in and there was no door left. "You wanted a chance to make him feel what you felt," Vivian whispered. "I'm handing it to you. Don't drop it." She turned toward the garage door, her heels clicking against the concrete. "Remember," she added over her shoulder, "people like Kieran don't feel earthquakes unless you shake the ground under their feet." The door closed behind her with a soft final click. Makina stood alone in the cold basement, the envelope throbbing in her palm like a heartbeat. When the system breaks you, do you break back? Or do you become the system? Drop a comment. What would you do? Upstairs, the man she'd met in the kitchen was probably staring out at the city again, lost in whatever ghost followed him through the dark. And Makina had just been handed the power to make him one. She climbed the stairs slowly, legs heavy, mind racing. She didn't know yet if she'd use it, but she knew one thing for sure. The woman who'd just walked away wasn't done. And whatever Vivian was planning, Makina had just become a piece in a game she didn't fully understand. A game where the only rule was survival, and the only prize was revenge. Makina climbed back upstairs with the envelope pressed against her ribs. It felt heavier than it should have. She slipped into her room and locked the door behind her, hands shaking as she pulled the envelope from her pocket and set it on the small desk by the window. For a long time, she just stared at it. White, plain, innocent looking. But inside was a choice she couldn't take back. Vivian's voice echoed in her head, calm and cold. Call it justice. Call it whatever helps you sleep. Makina sat down on the edge of her bed, her legs suddenly too weak to hold her up. She thought about her mother, the way Mama used to hum while she cooked, the way she'd sit on the edge of Makina's bed after a long shift and ask about her day, even when she was too tired to keep her eyes open. The way she'd say, "Baby, we're gonna be okay. We always find a way." But they hadn't been okay. The clinic closed, the bills piled up, the insurance ran out, and Mama's heart, already tired from years of taking care of everyone else, finally gave out. Makina remembered the funeral, the cheap casket, the handful of people who showed up, the pastor who didn't even know Mama's name and had to keep checking his notes. She remembered standing in the rain afterward, alone, staring at the fresh dirt and thinking, this is it. This is what her life added up to. And somewhere across the city, Kieran Locke had been sitting in his penthouse, untouched, unbothered, probably signing another deal, closing another door on someone's life without even looking back. The anger came back fast and sharp, but so did something else. The memory of Kieran's face in the library, the way his voice had softened when he talked about the nurse who'd left him sandwiches, the way he'd said she was one of the best people I ever met. He remembered her mother, not as a name on a payroll, not as a number in a file, as a person. McKenna's chest tightened. She opened the envelope slowly, her fingers trembling. Inside was a small glass vial, clear liquid. No label, no smell when she opened it. It looked like water, but it wasn't. It was death in a bottle. Slow, quiet, invisible. McKenna held it up to the light, her hand shaking. A few drops. That's all it would take. She could slip it into his tea tomorrow morning. Watch him drink it. Smile when he said thank you. Walk away clean. Weeks from now, he'd collapse. The doctors would scramble. The news would report it as a tragedy. And no one would ever know. Vivian would get her revenge. McKenna would get hers. And Kieran Locke would finally pay for the choices he'd made. Justice. That's what Vivian had called it. But was it? McKenna thought about the scars on Kieran's forearms, the way he flinched at fireworks, the way he'd asked her, "Do you ever feel like you're haunted by the things you didn't mean to break?" He was already broken, and killing him wouldn't bring Mama back. It wouldn't pay the bills. It wouldn't erase the nights McKenna had cried herself to sleep. It wouldn't undo the pain. It would just add more weight to a world already drowning in it. McKenna's hands started shaking harder. She thought about her mother's voice again. The thing she used to say when McKenna got angry, when the world felt unfair, when the hurt felt too big to carry. We don't fix hurt with more hurt, baby. Even when it feels like the only thing that fits. Tears spilled down McKenna's cheeks. She stared at the vial in her hand, at the choice sitting in her palm, at the line she'd have to cross if she went through with this, and for the first time since she'd walked into Kieran Locke's house, she didn't know what she wanted anymore. She didn't know if she could forgive him, but she didn't know if she could kill him either. The vial felt like it was burning her skin. And somewhere upstairs, in the quiet dark of his bedroom, the man whose life she held in her hands was probably lying awake, haunted by the same ghosts that had brought her here. McKenna closed her fingers around the vial and made a decision she wasn't sure she'd be able to live with. He didn't ask for tea that night. The vial sat in the lining of McKenna's apron, burning like ice against her skin. Days passed. Every time she carried a tray to his room, she felt it there. Every time he nodded or said, "Thank you, McKenna," her fingers twitched toward her pocket and stopped. She told herself she was waiting for the right moment, but the truth was, she didn't know if that moment would ever come. One evening, she found him in the kitchen alone. He stood in front of the stove, staring at a pot of water like he'd forgotten what he was doing. His shirt sleeves were rolled up. His hair was messy. He looked lost. "Can I help you with something, sir?" McKenna asked softly. He blinked like he'd just realized someone else was in the room. "I don't know," he said quietly. "I was trying to make something, but I can't remember what." He looked almost embarrassed. "What do you make when you can't sleep?" he asked. McKenna hesitated. Then she stepped closer. "My mother used to make warm milk with honey and nutmeg," she said. "She said it was like telling your body a bedtime story." His face softened. "Can you show me?" McKenna moved around the kitchen on instinct. Milk, honey, nutmeg. Simple. Safe. Her hands calmed as she stirred. Kieran watched her like he was watching a memory come to life. "You seem more at peace in here," he said quietly. "In the kitchen, the rules make sense," she replied. "You follow the steps, you get a result. Life doesn't work like that." No," he whispered. It doesn't. She poured the warm milk into a mug and handed it to him. He took a sip, closed his eyes, and let out a breath he'd been holding for too long. This is good, he said. Really good. She nodded, her throat tight. He looked at her then, really looked, and asked a question that felt heavier than it should have. Do you believe in forgiveness, Makina? Her fingers dug into the edge of the counter. I believe some people are sorry, she said carefully. But sorry doesn't bring anyone back. His face flinched like she'd slapped him. He set the mug down, his hands shaking slightly. The clinics I closed, he began, his voice low and raw. Makina's heart slammed in her chest. This was it. He was about to talk about the decision that had killed her mother, and the poison was still in her pocket. The board was going to cut everything, he said, the whole foundation, every clinic, every program. I panicked. I thought if I closed the ones losing the most money, I could save the rest. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration and guilt bleeding through every word. I told myself it was math, not faces, he continued. I told myself I was making the smart choice, the hard choice, the necessary choice. His voice cracked. But I still see that parking lot, he whispered. I still see that woman on her knees, asking where she's supposed to go now. She had 2 kids with her. They were crying, and I just sat in my car and watched. Tears burned behind Makina's eyes. I didn't answer her, he said. I didn't get out. I didn't help. I just drove away. He looked at Makina, his eyes red and raw. Why are you telling me this? She whispered. Because you look at me like you know what it feels like to lose someone because of someone else's choice, he said. And I'm tired of being the only one in this house who remembers what I did. Makina's breath shook. She wanted to scream that he was remembering it from a penthouse, not from a bus stop outside a closed clinic. She wanted to tell him that the woman in the parking lot might have been her mother. She wanted to pull the vial from her pocket and pour it into his mug right there in front of him, but instead she just stood there, frozen. Because somewhere between hating him and trying to understand him, the lines had blurred, and she didn't know which side of the line she was on anymore. Forgiveness isn't weakness, but neither is remembering. If this hit you, don't keep it to yourself. I should go, she said quietly. He nodded. Thank you, Makina. For listening. For the milk. For not running when I started talking. She turned toward the door, her hand brushing the pocket where the vial sat, and just as she reached the hallway, he called out softly. Makina? She stopped. I don't know if I deserve forgiveness, he said. But if I could go back and do it differently, I would. I'd choose people over numbers, every time. Makina's eyes burned. She didn't turn around. She just nodded once and walked away. Back to her room. Back to the vial. Back to the choice that was eating her alive. And as she closed the door behind her, one thought pounded in her head louder than anything else. What if the man upstairs wasn't the monster she needed him to be? Makina shut the door to her room and locked it. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip the handle. She leaned against the door, breathing hard, her mind replaying Kieran's words over and over. I still see that woman on her knees in the parking lot. That woman could have been her mother. Makina walked to the small desk by the window and pulled the vial from her pocket. She set it down and stared at it like it might explode. Clear liquid. No smell. No color. Just death. Sitting quietly in a glass bottle. She thought about what Kieran had said in the kitchen. The panic. The pressure. The choice he'd made because he thought it was the only one he had. He was wrong. He could have fought harder. He could have said no. He could have chosen people over money. But he didn't. And Mama paid the price. Makina's chest burned with anger, with grief, with something heavier than both. She picked up the vial, her fingers trembling. This was it. This was the moment she'd been building toward since the day she walked into this house. All she had to do was hold on to it, wait for the right time, slip it into his tea tomorrow morning, watch him drink it, walk away. Justice, revenge, whatever word made it easier to sleep at night. But then her mother's voice echoed in her head, soft, steady, the way it used to sound when Makina was little, and the world felt too big and too mean. We don't fix hurt with more hurt, baby, even when it feels like the only thing that fits. Makina's eyes burned. Tears spilled down her cheeks, hot and fast. She stood up, walked to the bathroom sink, and turned on the tap. The water ran cold. Clear. Clean. She stared at the vial in her hand, at the choice sitting in her palm, at the line she'd have to cross if she went through with this. And then she uncapped it. The poison swirled into the water, invisible, gone in seconds. Makina watched it disappear down the drain, her heart pounding, her breath shaking. It was done. She couldn't take it back. She dropped the empty vial into the trash and gripped the edge of the sink, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She didn't recognize the person staring back. Her phone buzzed on the desk behind her. Makina turned slowly, her stomach twisting. Vivian. The message was short, direct, cold. Did you use it? Makina stared at the screen, her pulse roaring in her ears. She thought about telling the truth, about saying she'd flushed it, about cutting ties with Vivian and walking away from this whole mess before it got worse. But something stopped her. Fear, maybe. Or self-preservation. Or the instinct that told her Vivian wasn't the kind of person who let people walk away clean. So instead, Makina typed back a lie. He hasn't asked for tea yet. I'm waiting. The response came almost instantly. Good. Don't make me wait much longer. Makina set the phone down, her hands still shaking. She'd bought herself time, but not much. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Vivian wasn't waiting anymore. The plan had already changed, and while Makina thought she'd just saved Kieran's life by flushing the poison, Vivian had already set something else in motion, something faster, something crueler, something that didn't need Makina's help at all. Upstairs, Kieran sat on the edge of his bed, staring out at the city, haunted by the faces he'd tried to forget. He didn't know that in less than 48 hours someone close to him would try to make sure he never saw another sunrise. And the woman who'd just flushed the poison down the drain was about to become the only person standing between him and the edge of a 28-story drop. Makina climbed into bed, exhausted, relieved, terrified. She thought the hardest choice was behind her. She had no idea it was only the beginning. The storm came on Thursday. By midnight, the sky was a bruise. Rain punched the glass walls like fists. Thunder rolled through the building, deep and low, shaking the floors. Most of the staff were asleep. Makina couldn't. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thoughts buzzing louder than the weather outside. She'd flushed the poison. She'd made her choice. But Vivian's last message kept replaying in her head. Don't make me wait much longer. Something about it felt wrong. Too calm. Too confident. Like Vivian had already moved on to the next step. Makina threw off the covers and slipped into the hallway, barefoot and restless. The penthouse was dark except for the emergency lights along the baseboards. The storm outside made everything feel colder. She wandered quietly, half hoping the sound of rain would drown out her thoughts. Then she heard voices. Low. Controlled. Coming from Kieran's office. Makina froze. The door was cracked open just enough for light to spill into the dark hallway. She edged closer, her heart pounding, and pressed her shoulder to the wall near the opening. Two voices drifted out. One was rough, male, unfamiliar. The other was sharp, calm, cold. "Vivian." "You're sure about tonight?" the man asked. "Stop asking," Vivian replied. "At 2 a.m., the system malfunctions. Fire, alarms, camera glitch, the usual chaos. Kieran goes out to the balcony for air. He always does. That's when you shove. He goes over 28 floors. Everyone cries. The story writes itself." McKenna's breath caught in her throat. Falcony. Shove. 2 a.m. Her legs felt like they might give out. "And the will?" the man asked. His voice was rough, like gravel scraping metal. McKenna didn't recognize it, but the tone was clear. This wasn't his first job. "I already have power of attorney," Vivian said smoothly. "He signed everything months ago during a panic attack. Didn't even read it. That's the beauty of haunted men. They're easy to guide." The man chuckled. "You really want him gone." "I want what he never gave," Vivian said. "Control." McKenna's pulse roared in her ears. Footsteps scraped inside the office. Shadows shifted across the crack in the door. 2 a.m., Vivian said. "Be ready. I'll handle the alarms. You handle him." "What about the maid?" the man asked. "The one you recruited. What if she talks?" Vivian's voice didn't change, didn't flinch. "She won't," she said. "She's too afraid. And even if she does, who's going to believe her? A nobody from Atlanta with a grudge against the man she's been working for? She's the perfect scapegoat if we need one." McKenna's stomach twisted. She backed away from the door as quietly as she could, her hands trembling, her breath coming too fast. The office door clicked shut. McKenna stood there in the dark hallway, frozen. Her mind was spinning. 2 a.m. fire alarms, balcony, shove. She'd flushed one murder plan away, but another one, faster and crueler, was already racing toward him. And the clock was ticking. Would you speak up if you overheard something like this? Or stay silent? Some choices haunt you forever. McKenna turned and ran back to her room, her feet silent on the cold floors. She locked the door behind her and leaned against it, her chest heaving. She pulled out her phone and checked the time. 12:47 a.m. Less than 2 hours. Her hands shook as she tried to think. She could call the police. But what would she say? That she overheard the man's trusted advisor planning to kill him? With no proof? No recording? Just her word against Vivian's? She could wake the other staff. But Vivian controlled the security team. She controlled the schedules. She controlled everything. McKenna's breath came faster. There was only one option left. She had to warn him. She had to go upstairs, walk into Kieran Locke's bedroom, and tell him that the woman he trusted most in the world was about to kill him. And she had to do it now. Before the alarms went off. Before Marcus got into position. Before Kieran walked out onto that balcony and never came back. McKenna grabbed a jacket and slipped it over her shoulders. Her phone buzzed. She looked down. "Vivian, stay on your floor tonight. Things are going to get loud. I need you ready to act surprised." McKenna's blood ran cold. Vivian was already setting the stage, already writing the script, already making sure McKenna played her part, but McKenna wasn't going to play anymore. She shoved her phone into her pocket and stepped into the hallway. The storm outside roared, and somewhere upstairs, a man who didn't know he was about to die was probably staring out at the city one last time. McKenna ran toward the stairs, because if she didn't move now, Kieran Locke wouldn't live to see the morning. And she'd have to live with the fact that she'd heard it coming and done nothing. We're back to where we started. Rain. Midnight. The man on the bed. The maid in the doorway. "Please, sir," McKenna whispered, her voice shaking. "Vivian and a man named Marcus are going to trigger the alarms at 2. Cameras will go down. They know you go to the balcony when things get loud. He'll push you over. They've already written your obituary." Kieran's brow furrowed, his face shifting from confusion to disbelief. Vivian? He repeated slowly. That's impossible. She's been with me for 10 years. She's the reason this house even runs. She's also the reason I'm here, McKenna said, her voice trembling. She recruited me, found me online, knew everything about my mother in the clinic. She put me in this job with a plan. He stared at her, confusion shifting into something darker. What plan? He asked. Here it was, the line she couldn't uncross. McKenna stepped closer, her heart pounding in her throat. When I came here, she said, I didn't come to save you. His jaw tightened. McKenna, I came to kill you. The words hung between them like a lightning strike. Thunder boomed outside, almost on cue, shaking the glass walls. Kieran's fingers curled into the sheets. His face went pale. His eyes searched hers like he was trying to find the lie. You expect me to believe that? He said slowly, each word sharp. And still trust anything you say tonight? McKenna swallowed hard. You're still breathing, aren't you? Silence pressed in around them. Rain hammered the windows. The storm outside was getting worse. Kieran stood up from the bed, his body tense, his hands shaking slightly. What are you talking about? He demanded. Explain. Now. McKenna's chest ached. She'd kept this buried for so long. And now it was all spilling out. Vivian gave me a vial, she said. Poison. Told me to put a few drops in your drink. Said it would take weeks. Said it would look natural. Said no one would ever know. His face went even paler. Did you? He whispered. Did you poison me? No, she said quickly. I hated you. I wanted to. I carried it in my pocket and imagined you collapsing. I heard your name on the news and pictured myself free. Tears spilled over. Then I saw who you were when no one was looking, she continued. The way you remember a nurse's sandwiches, the way you stare at the city like you're apologizing to it, the way you actually listen when I talk. She swallowed hard. I stood over my sink and watched the poison go down the drain. Kieran didn't move, didn't speak. He just stared at her like he was trying to decide if she was real or if this whole night was some kind of nightmare. Vivian thinks I'm still waiting, McKenna said. She thinks her plan is moving too slow, so she found a faster way. The balcony. The shove. The fall. She pointed at the clock on his nightstand. It's 12:50, sir. You can stay in this bed and pretend everything is okay. Or you can believe the woman who almost killed you and let her save you instead. His heart hammered against his ribs. He hadn't trusted anyone in years, not since the panic attack started, not since the world felt too big and too loud and too full of people who wanted things from him. And now his life depended on trusting the one person who had almost become his executioner. Why should I believe you? He asked quietly. McKenna's eyes burned. Because I didn't have to come here tonight, she said. I could have stayed in my room. I could have let it happen. I could have walked away clean. She stepped closer. But I didn't, she whispered. Because somewhere between hating you and trying to forgive you, I realized I didn't want you dead. I wanted you to be better. Her voice cracked. And you can't be better if you're not breathing. Thunder rolled again, louder this time. Kieran looked at her, really looked. At the tears on her face, at the fear in her eyes, at the way her hands were shaking. She wasn't lying. He didn't know how he knew, but he did. What do we do? He asked. McKenna exhaled, relief flooding through her. We don't have much time, she said, but if we move fast, we can flip this whole thing on her. How? He asked. She took a breath. You have to pretend you're dead. His eyes widened. What? We fake it, she said. You disappear. Vivian thinks the plan worked. While she's celebrating, you're somewhere quiet, watching everything. We record her. We catch her. We end this. Kieran ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. And if it doesn't work? He asked. Makina's jaw tightened. Then we both die, she said, but at least we'll die fighting back. He stared at her for a long moment, then he nodded. Okay, he said. Tell me what to do. Tell me everything, Kieran said, his voice low and urgent. From the beginning. No more holding back. Makina took a shaky breath. 3 months ago someone messaged me, she started. Anonymous. No profile picture. They said they could get me inside your house. Good pay. No questions asked. And you said yes, Kieran said. I said yes, she admitted, because I wanted to hurt you the way you hurt me. His jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. My mother worked at your clinic in Atlanta, Makina continued, her voice breaking. When you closed it, she lost everything. Her job, her insurance, her will to keep going. She died 3 months later. Kieran's face crumpled. I came here with hate in my chest, Makina said. I wanted you to suffer. I wanted you to know what it felt like to lose everything because someone else decided your life didn't matter. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Then Vivian met me in the basement, she continued. She handed me an envelope. Inside was a vial, poison. She told me to put it in your tea, a few drops. That's all it would take. Weeks later you'd collapse, heart failure, natural causes. No one would ever know. Kieran's breath came faster. Did you use it? He asked again, his voice barely above a whisper. I carried it everywhere, she said. In my pocket. Against my skin. Every time I brought you tea, every time I walked past you, I felt it burning. I imagined you drinking it. Collapsing. Dying alone. Tears streamed down her face. But then I saw you, she whispered. Not the man on the news. Not the billionaire who signed papers and walked away. I saw the man who flinched at fireworks, who remembered my mother's sandwiches, who asked if I believed in forgiveness. She swallowed hard. I stood over my sink one night and watched the poison swirl down the drain, she said. I couldn't do it. Not because you didn't deserve it, but because I couldn't become the thing I hated. Kieran's eyes were red. His hand shook. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. Because I was afraid, she said. Afraid Vivian would find out. Afraid you'd turn me in. Afraid I'd made the wrong choice. She stepped closer. But tonight I heard her, Makina said. She's done waiting for me. She has a man named Marcus. At 2 a.m., the alarms go off. Cameras glitch. You go to the balcony like you always do. And he pushes you over. Kieran's face went pale. Vivian wouldn't. She already has, Makina interrupted. She has power of attorney. You signed it months ago during a panic attack. She's been planning this for years, and I was just supposed to be her backup plan. Thunder cracked outside, so loud it rattled the windows. Kieran sat back down on the bed, his head in his hands. I trusted her, he said quietly, with everything. I know, Makina whispered. He looked up at her, his eyes searching hers. Why should I trust you now? He asked. After everything you just told me? Makina's chest ached. Because I didn't have to come here, she said. I could have stayed in my room. Let it happen. Walked away clean. But I didn't. She knelt down in front of him so they were eye to eye. I'm not asking you to forgive me, she said. I'm asking you to let me help you stay alive. Just tonight. Just long enough to prove what she's doing. Trust is the hardest thing to give when you've been burned. If you've ever taken that leap, you know how this feels. Kieran stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, he said. What do we do? Makina exhaled, relief flooding through her. We have less than an hour, she said. We need to move fast. She stood up and glanced at the clock. 1:03 a.m. 57 minutes until the alarms went off. 57 minutes to fake a death. Disappear. a billionaire, and catch a killer. First, McKenna said, we get you out of this building without anyone seeing you. How? Kieran asked. The service stairs, she said. The ones by the laundry room. Security doesn't watch them as closely. Vivian never cared about what she couldn't see. And then what? He asked. You drive, she said. Away from here, away from cameras. Check into some cheap motel off the highway under a fake name. Turn on the news and watch your own death. His stomach twisted. What about you? He asked. I stay here, she said. I play the part. I scream. I cry. I tell Vivian I saw you fall. She'll kill you, Kieran said, his voice sharp. If she figures out you helped me. She won't, McKenna said. Not if I sell it right. Kieran stood up, his face set with determination. I'm not leaving you here alone, he said. You don't have a choice, McKenna replied. If you stay, you die. If I leave, she knows something's wrong. She grabbed his hand. This is the only way, she said. He looked down at their hands, hers small and trembling, his scarred and tired. If this doesn't work, he started. Then we tried, she said, and that's more than either of us has done in a long time. He nodded, and together they stepped into the hallway. The clock was ticking, and somewhere in the building, Vivian was already setting the stage for a murder. Wait, Kieran said suddenly, stopping in the hallway. Let's call the police. They can send a team, catch her in the act. McKenna turned to face him, her expression tight. With what? She asked. My word against hers? She has business cards and board seats. I have an apron and a Georgia accent. Kieran's jaw tightened. Then my security team. They're not stupid. They'll believe me. Who hires them? McKenna shot back. The question hit him like ice water. The answer was obvious. Vivian. She interviewed every guard, approved every hire, managed every schedule. She'd built the entire security system around him, layer by layer, until she controlled every person standing between him and danger. And now, she was the danger. For years, you let her choose who stands between you and the world, McKenna said softly. Now she is the threat. And they all answer to her. Kieran ran a hand over his face, his world tilting. Then I call my lawyer, he said. The board chair. Someone with power. In the middle of the night? McKenna asked. And say what? My maid overheard my trusted advisor plotting to push me off a balcony. You won't make it to the second sentence before Vivian rewrites the script and makes you sound unstable. He knew she was right. His reputation had been built on control, precision, logic. If he called someone at 1 a.m, panicking about a murder plot with no proof, no recordings, no evidence, they'd think he was having a breakdown, and Vivian would be right there, concerned and calm, suggesting he take some time off, maybe see his therapist, maybe sign a few more papers while he was at it. His breath came shallow. So what? He asked, frustration bleeding into his voice. I just pack a bag and run? McKenna shook her head. No, she said firmly. We don't run. We move. He frowned. What's the difference? Running is leaving everything behind and hoping the monster gets bored, she said. Moving is choosing where you stand when it comes for you. She stepped closer, her eyes sharp and focused. You're good at strategy, right? She asked. At games? At reading people? I used to be, he said quietly. Then treat this like one, she said. She thinks she's 3 moves ahead. We make her think she wins. Then we flip the board on her. His pulse slowed just enough for a thought to land. And how, exactly, do we do that? He asked. You die, McKenna said simply. His muscles tightened. Not for real, she added quickly. You disappear. You let Vivian think the plan worked. While she's busy celebrating and claiming your empire, you're somewhere quiet, watching everything. And then what? He asked. Then she gets bold, McKenna said. She'll move money, sign things, call her partners. She'll think she's untouchable, and we'll record everything. Kieran searched her face. It was risky, insane even, but it was the only plan that didn't end with him actually dead. What about proof? He asked. If I'm dead, she becomes the truth. She controls the narrative. That's why we make your death the trap, McKenna said. She thinks you're gone. She gets sloppy. We catch her on camera, on audio, whatever we can get. Then you come back from the dead and show the world exactly who she is. He stared at her for a long moment. Why risk your life for me? He asked quietly. After what I cost you? McKenna looked away, her throat tight, because somewhere between hating you and trying to forgive you, she thought, I started to care if you lived. But all she said was, because someone has to break the cycle before it breaks both of us. Kieran nodded slowly, his chest heavy. Okay, he said. What do we do first? McKenna exhaled, relief flooding through her. First, we get you out, she said. Service stairs by the laundry room, down to the garage. There's an old sedan the driver uses for errands. Keys are under the mat. No convoy, no security, just you. And then, he asked. You drive, she said. Away from cameras, away from here. Check into some off-highway motel under a fake name. Turn on the news and watch your own death. His skin crawled at the thought. Meanwhile, I stay here, McKenna continued. I cry, I scream. I tell Vivian I saw you go over. Pain flickered across his face. I'm sorry for putting that on you, he said. She shook her head. You didn't. The world did. Vivian did. I'm just choosing what to do with it. A soft mechanical click echoed through the building. The system. Seconds later, sirens began to wail. The fire alarms screamed alive. Lights flickered. Chaos. Go, McKenna shouted over the noise. But, before he could move, Kieran did something she didn't expect. He kissed her forehead, quick, gentle, desperate. Stay alive, he said. Then he turned and ran for the service stairs as staff doors flew open and sleepy faces appeared in the hallways. McKenna watched him disappear into the shadows. Then she turned back toward the balcony floor and saw a tall, unfamiliar shadow moving through the chaos toward the glass doors. It wasn't Vivian. It was Marcus, and he was heading straight for the place where Kieran should have been. You die, McKenna said, her voice steady despite the storm raging outside. Kieran stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Not for real, she added quickly. You disappear. You let Vivian think the plan worked. While she's busy celebrating and claiming your empire, you're somewhere quiet, watching everything. He shook his head slowly. You make it sound easy. It's not, she said, but it's possible. She stepped closer, her voice urgent. At 2 a.m., when the alarms go off, you don't go to the balcony, she said. You slip down the back stairs. Take the old sedan the driver uses for errands. No security, no convoy, just you. Cap low, hood up. In the chaos, no one will notice one more man heading toward the garage. And then what? He asked. You drive, she said. Away from cameras, away from here. You check into some off-highway motel under a fake name. You turn on the news and watch your own death. His skin crawled at the thought. Meanwhile, I stay here, she continued. I cry. I scream. I tell Vivian I saw you go over the balcony. His stomach twisted. What about proof? He asked. If I'm dead, she becomes the truth. She controls everything. That's why we make your death the trap, McKenna said. She thinks you're gone, she gets bold. She calls her partners, moves money, signs things. We record everything. She pulled out her phone. I'll set up my phone somewhere hidden, she said. Audio at least, maybe video if I can. When she starts talking, when she starts celebrating, we'll have it all. Kieran searched her face, looking for doubt, for fear, for any sign that this plan was as crazy as it sounded, but all he saw was determination. "Why risk your life for me?" he asked quietly. "After what I cost you?" McKenna looked away, her throat tight. She thought about her mother, about the clinic, about the nights she'd spent hating this man from a distance. And then she thought about the way he'd looked at the photo in the library, the way his voice had cracked when he talked about the nurse who'd yelled at him, the way he'd asked if she believed in forgiveness. "Somewhere between hating you and trying to forgive you," she thought, "I started to care if you lived." But she didn't say that. Instead, she said, "Because someone has to break the cycle before it breaks both of us." Breaking cycles isn't easy. It's painful, lonely, but someone has to start. If this resonates, pass it on. Kieran stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Okay," he said. "Let's do it." McKenna exhaled, relief flooding through her. She glanced at the clock on his nightstand. 1:14 a.m. 46 minutes until the alarms went off. 46 minutes to prepare for a fake death. 46 minutes to outsmart a woman who'd been planning this for years. "We need to move fast," McKenna said. "First, we get you into different clothes. No suit, no watch, nothing that screams billionaire." Kieran nodded and moved toward his closet. "Dark hoodie," McKenna said. "Jeans, baseball cap. You need to look like someone nobody notices." He pulled out the clothes quickly, his hand steady now. Focused. "Cash?" she asked. He nodded toward a small safe disguised as a book on his shelf. "Code is 4792. McKenna opened it and pulled out thick stacks of bills. "You trust me with this?" she asked. "I'm trusting you with my heartbeat," he replied. "The cash is the least of it." She tucked the money into a small backpack she found in his closet. "Phone?" she asked. "I'll leave it here," he said. "They can track it." "Good," she said. "I'll get you a burner tomorrow. For now, you stay off the grid." He changed quickly, pulling the hoodie over his head, tugging the cap low over his eyes. He looked different. Smaller. Human. Not like the man whose face was on magazine covers. "One more thing," McKenna said. She stepped closer and looked him in the eye. "When you get to the motel, don't call anyone," she said. "Don't reach out. Don't try to help. Just wait. Watch the news. Let Vivian think she won." "And you?" he asked. "What if she figures out you helped me?" "She won't," McKenna said. "Not if I sell it right." "But if she does, then I deal with it," she said firmly. "But you can't come back early. You can't try to save me. If you do, this whole thing falls apart." His jaw tightened. "I don't like leaving you here alone," he said. "I'm not asking you to like it," she said. "I'm asking you to trust me." He reached out and took her hand. "If this doesn't work," he said quietly, "if something happens to you—" "Then we tried," she interrupted, "and that's more than most people do." He nodded, his grip tightening on her hand for just a second longer. Then he let go. "Let's move," she said. They stepped into the hallway together. The storm outside roared, the clock ticked, and somewhere in the building, Vivian was already setting the stage for a murder she thought would go exactly as planned. But what she didn't know was that the man she wanted dead was about to vanish, and the woman she'd underestimated was about to become the most dangerous piece on the board. They moved through the penthouse like thieves, but just before they reached the stairs, Kieran stopped. "Wait," he said, his voice rough. "You think you know what I cost you? Tell me anyway." He needed to hear it. Needed the knife. McKenna turned to face him, her chest tight. "Why?" she asked. "Because I need to know what I'm asking you to risk your life for," he said. "I need to know why you're doing this." She took a slow, shaky breath. "My mother was a nurse at your clinic in Atlanta," she said. The Locke Foundation Community Health Center. She loved that place, loved her patients. She'd come home tired, but she'd still smile when she talked about them. Kieran's face went pale. One morning, she went in and found the doors locked. McKenna continued, her voice breaking. A piece of paper taped to the glass. Your foundation logo at the top. Due to restructuring, she swallowed hard. She lost her job, her insurance, her meds. Tears burned in her eyes, but she kept going. She told me, I've taken care of people my whole life. Turns out nobody planned to take care of me. Kieran's jaw clenched, his hands curled into fists. She got weaker, McKenna whispered. I took extra shifts. We got behind on everything. Rent, bills, food. One night she grabbed her chest and slid to the kitchen floor. Her voice cracked. I waited 43 minutes for an ambulance we couldn't afford, she said. She died 3 days later in a hospital bed that smelled like bleach and broken promises. Kieran closed his eyes, pain etched into every line of his face. You were on a stage that same week, McKenna said, her voice sharp now. Talking about hard choices and reallocating resources. I saw the clip. You were calm, confident, like closing that clinic was just another Tuesday. His breath shook. I hated you, she said. I still don't know if I forgive you. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the tears streaming down her face. But I don't want your story to end the way mine did, she whispered, on a floor, alone, with nobody fighting for you. Silence pressed in around them. Heavy, raw, honest. Kieran opened his eyes, and for the first time, the anger in front of him didn't make him want to defend himself. It made him want to change. I can't fix what I did, he said quietly. I can't go back and reopen that clinic or give your mother her breath back. His voice broke. But if I survive this, he continued, if I make it through tonight, I can change how I live with what I've done. McKenna nodded, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand. Then start by not dying, she said. He almost laughed. It came out more like a breath. Lightning flashed outside, painting the hallway white for a second, then plunging them back into shadows. When this is over, he murmured, if I still have a company, we'll talk about clinics again. Properly. With faces. Not just numbers. She studied him. There was something in his eyes now that hadn't been there before. Not just fear. Not just guilt. A fragile kind of hope. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the scar near his hairline, the tired lines he'd earned from years of carrying ghosts. Thank you, he said softly, for not killing me. Her lips trembled into a half smile. Thank you, she whispered back, for listening before you ran. For a heartbeat, the air between them felt different, warmer, like two people standing on the same side of something for the first time. Then the building's security system beeped softly in the hallway, a routine status chime. Both of them flinched. Time was moving. We need to go, McKenna said. Kieran nodded. They stepped toward the service stairs together, but just as they reached the door, McKenna grabbed his arm. One more thing, she said. He turned. If you make it out, she said quietly, don't come back for me until it's safe. Promise me. His jaw tightened. McKenna, promise me, she repeated. He stared at her for a long moment, then he nodded. I promise. She let go of his arm. Good, she said. Now go. He opened the door to the service stairs and disappeared into the shadows. McKenna stood there alone in the hallway, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. She'd just sent a billionaire into the night with nothing but a hoodie, a backpack full of cash, and a plan that could get them both killed. And now she had to walk back upstairs and convince a killer that everything had gone exactly as planned. She took a deep breath, steadied herself, and turned back toward the balcony floor. Because the hardest part wasn't over. It was just beginning. The room felt smaller now, heavy with honesty, heavy with things they couldn't take back. "I can't fix what I did," Kieran said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't go back and reopen that clinic or give your mother her breath back. But if I survive this, if I make it through tonight, I can change how I live with what I've done." Makina nodded, wiping her cheeks with the heel of her palm. "Then start by not dying tonight," she said. He almost laughed. It came out more like a breath, something caught between relief and disbelief. Lightning flashed outside, painting the room white for a second, then plunging them back into shadows. "When this is over," he murmured, "if I still have a company, we'll talk about clinics again. Properly. With faces, not just numbers." She studied him. There was something in his eyes now that hadn't been there when she first walked into his room. Not just fear, not just guilt. A fragile kind of hope. The kind that could break if you held it too tight, but also the kind that could grow if you let it breathe. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the scar near his hairline, the tired lines he'd earned from years of carrying ghosts no one else could see. "Thank you," he said softly, "for not killing me." Her lips trembled into a half smile. "Thank you," she whispered back, "for listening before you ran." For a heartbeat, the air between them felt different, warmer, like two people standing on the same side of something for the first time, like two wounded souls who'd found each other in the dark and decided not to let go. Hope is fragile, but it's also the thing that keeps us breathing. If you felt that, someone else needs to feel it too. Kieran reached out and gently touched her hand. Not grabbing, not holding, just resting his fingers against hers. A gesture that said, "I see you. I hear you. I'm here." Makina didn't pull away. She let the moment sit between them, quiet and real. "If we pull this off," he said quietly, "you and I are going to have a long conversation about what comes next." "If we pull this off," she replied, "you're buying me the biggest plate of pancakes I've ever seen." He smiled. A real one this time. "Deal," he said. Then the building's security system beeped softly in the hallway, a routine status chime that reminded them both that time wasn't stopping for tender moments. Both of them flinched. The spell broke. Reality crashed back in. "We need to move," Makina said, her voice shifting back into urgency. Kieran nodded, his face hardening into focus. "Service stairs," she reminded him. "Third car from the left in the garage. Keys under the mat. Don't turn your phone on until you're miles away." "And you?" he asked. "I go back upstairs," she said. "I play my part. I scream when I see you fall." Pain flickered across his face at the thought. "I'm sorry for putting that on you," he said. She shook her head. "You didn't. The world did. Vivian did. I'm just choosing what to do with it." A soft mechanical click echoed through the building, the system preparing for the next cycle. They both knew what was coming. In less than 30 minutes, the alarms would scream, the lights would flicker, chaos would erupt, and Kieran Locke would either disappear into the night or die trying. "Stay alive," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You too," she replied. He turned toward the door, but before he could leave, Makina called out softly, "Kieran." He stopped and looked back. "When you're out there alone in some motel room," she said, "don't lose yourself. Don't let the fear eat you. Remember why you're doing this." He nodded, his throat tight. "I will," he said, and then he was gone. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Makina stood there alone in the dim hallway, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. She'd just sent a billionaire into the night with nothing but hope and a backpack full of cash. And now she had to walk back upstairs and face a woman who'd been planning murder for years. She took a deep breath, steadied herself, and turned back toward the balcony floor. But as she walked, a voice in the back of her mind whispered a question she couldn't ignore. What if Vivian already knew? What if she'd seen them talking? What if the plan was already falling apart? McKenna's pulse quickened. She reached the balcony hallway just as she heard footsteps behind her. Heavy, purposeful, close. She turned slowly and came face to face with Marcus, the man from Vivian's office, the man who was supposed to push Kieran off the balcony. He stood there in the shadows, arms crossed, eyes cold. "Looking for someone?" asked. McKenna's blood ran cold. "Looking for someone?" Marcus asked, his voice low and rough. McKenna's heart slammed against her ribs. She forced herself to stay calm, to breathe, to think. "Just checking the halls," she said, keeping her voice steady. "The storm's making everyone restless. Mrs. Patton asked me to make sure everything's locked up." Marcus studied her face, his eyes cold and calculating. "You should be in bed," he said. "It's late." "So should you," she replied. "But here we are." He didn't move, didn't blink. The hallway felt smaller, colder. "Go back to your room, McKenna," he said. "Things are about to get loud around here." She nodded slowly, her mind racing. "Yes, sir," she said. She turned and walked away, every muscle in her body screaming at her to run. But she kept her pace steady, casual, like she had nothing to hide. She didn't look back, not until she turned the corner and pressed herself against the wall, her breath coming fast and shallow. Marcus knew her name. Vivian had told him about her, which meant they were watching her, which meant she had even less time than she thought. She pulled out her phone and checked the time. 1:32 a.m., 28 minutes until the alarms went off, 28 minutes until Marcus went looking for Kieran on that balcony, 28 minutes to make sure the man she'd just sent into the night actually made it out alive. McKenna slipped down the hallway toward the service stairs, moving as quietly as she could. She had to make sure Kieran got out, had to make sure he wasn't still fumbling with car keys or stuck in the garage. She pushed open the door to the stairwell and froze. Voices echoed up from below. Sharp. Female. Vivian. "Double-check the balcony doors," Vivian said. "I don't want any surprises when the system fails tonight." "Already done," a man's voice replied. Not Marcus, someone else. "Good," Vivian said. "At 2 a.m., the alarms trigger. Cameras go down for exactly 4 minutes. That's your window. He goes to the balcony. You push. Clean. Simple. No hesitation." "And the maid?" the man asked. "She's been quiet," Vivian said. "Too quiet. Keep an eye on her. If she gets in the way, handle it." McKenna's blood turned to ice. Handle it. She backed away from the stairwell door as quietly as she could, her hands shaking. They were everywhere. Vivian had people on every floor, watching, waiting, ready to clean up any loose ends, and McKenna had just become a loose end. She turned and moved quickly back toward the main hallway, her mind spinning. She had to warn Kieran, had to make sure he knew the plan had already started. But she couldn't call him. He'd left his phone behind. She couldn't text him. He was off the grid. All she could do was trust that he'd made it to the garage, that he'd found the car, that he was already driving away into the night. But what if he wasn't? What if he was still here? McKenna's pulse roared in her ears. She moved toward the back of the penthouse, toward the service elevator that led down to the garage. She had to check. Had to know. She pressed the button and waited, her heart pounding, her hands trembling. The elevator doors opened. Empty. She stepped inside and hit the button for the garage level. The doors closed. The elevator descended. McKenna closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing. If Kieran was still down there, she'd warn him. Tell him to move faster. Tell him Vivian had more people than they thought. If he was gone, she'd go back upstairs and play her part. Scream. Cry. Sell the lie. The elevator slowed. The doors opened. The garage was dark. Quiet. Rows of expensive cars sat gleaming under dim lights. McKenna stepped out, her footsteps echoing on the concrete. "Kieran?" she whispered. No answer. She moved toward the third car from the left, the old sedan the driver used for errands. It was gone. Relief flooded through her. He'd made it out. He was gone. She turned to head back to the elevator, and froze. Standing in the shadows near the entrance to the garage, watching her, was Vivian. Her arms were crossed, her face was calm, her eyes were ice. "Hello, McKenna," she said softly. "Looking for something?" McKenna's breath caught in her throat. She started. "Save it," Vivian interrupted. "I know what you've been doing. I know where he is. And I know you think you're clever." She stepped closer, her heels clicking on the concrete. "But here's the thing about clever little girls," Vivian said, her voice sharp as glass. "They always forget that someone smarter is watching." McKenna's pulse hammered. "You didn't flush that poison because you had a change of heart," Vivian continued. "You flushed it because you wanted to play hero. You wanted to save him. You wanted to be the one who broke the cycle." She smiled, cold and predatory. "But you're not the hero, McKenna," she said. "You're the distraction." McKenna's stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" she whispered. Vivian pulled out her phone and held it up. On the screen was a live feed, a motel room, cheap, dark, a man sitting on the edge of a bed pulling off a baseball cap. Kieran. "You really think I didn't track him?" Vivian asked. "You think I didn't plan for this?" McKenna's legs felt like they might give out. "He's not safe," Vivian said. "He never was. And neither are you." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Now," she said, "you're going to do exactly what I say. Or the man you just saved is going to die anyway." "What do you want?" McKenna asked, her voice barely steady. Vivian smiled, slow and sharp. "I want you to go back upstairs," she said. "I want you to stand on that balcony floor when the alarms go off. I want you to scream, to cry, to sell the story that Kieran Locke fell to his death." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "And if you do exactly what I say," Vivian continued, "I'll let him live. For now." McKenna's mind raced. "You're lying," she said. "You're going to kill him anyway." "Maybe," Vivian said, "but if you don't cooperate, I'll kill him tonight. Right now. One phone call and the man I have watching that motel puts a bullet in his head." She held up her phone again, the live feed still glowing on the screen. Kieran sat on the edge of the bed, oblivious, exhausted, vulnerable. McKenna's chest ached. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Because I can," Vivian said simply. "Because I've spent 10 years building this. And I'm not going to let some maid with a hero complex ruin it." She tucked her phone back into her coat. "Now," she said, "you're going back upstairs. You're going to play your part. And when the time comes, you're going to scream like your life depends on it. Because it does." McKenna swallowed hard. She had no choice. Not if she wanted Kieran to stay alive. "Okay," she whispered. "Good girl," Vivian said. She turned and walked toward the elevator, her heels clicking on the concrete. "Oh, and McKenna?" she called over her shoulder. McKenna looked up. "Don't try anything clever," Vivian said. "I have eyes everywhere. If you so much as blink wrong, he dies." The elevator doors closed behind her. McKenna stood there alone in the dark garage, her hands shaking, her mind spinning. She'd thought she was one step ahead, but Vivian had been 10 steps ahead the entire time. She took a shaky breath and headed back to the elevator. She had to play along, had to buy time, had to find a way to warn Kieran without Vivian knowing. But how? She stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the penthouse level. The doors closed, the elevator rose, and as it did, McKenna made a decision. She wasn't going to let Vivian win. Not tonight. Not ever. The elevator doors opened. McKenna stepped out into the hallway, her face calm, her hand steady. She moved toward the balcony floor where Vivian stood near the glass doors, tablet in hand, dressed in a sleek black suit like she was already planning the press conference. "Couldn't sleep?" Vivian asked without looking up. McKenna forced a small laugh. "Storms loud." "Get used to storms," Vivian murmured. "The world doesn't stay calm forever." McKenna's palm itched where she'd once held the vial. "What are you doing up, ma'am?" she asked, keeping her tone light. "System check," Vivian said. "His security's being updated tonight. Fire alarms, cameras. It'll be chaos for a few minutes. I plan for the chaos." She finally lifted her eyes, studying McKenna's face. "You've been quiet lately," Vivian said. "No more updates." "I've been cleaning," McKenna replied. "That's what you hired me for, right?" Vivian's lips curved slightly. "I hired you for much more than that," she said. "Don't forget it." She tapped her tablet. 2 hours, she said. "When the alarms go off, I need you on this floor. The staff will panic. I want someone I trust nearby to fetch towels, call for help, cry at the right time." McKenna's stomach churned. "You can do that for me." "Can't you?" Vivian asked softly. McKenna nodded, throat tight. "Yes, ma'am." "Good," Vivian said, already turning away. "We're about to make history tonight, McKenna. Evil doesn't always look like a villain. Sometimes it wears a smile and asks politely. If this chilled you, don't scroll past it." She didn't know how right she was, because if McKenna and Kieran pulled this off, history wouldn't remember Vivian the way she wanted. It would remember her as the woman who lost. McKenna walked back toward her room, her mind racing. She had 2 hours. 2 hours to figure out how to outsmart a woman who'd been planning this for a decade. 2 hours to save Kieran without getting them both killed. 2 hours to prove that sometimes the underestimated are the most dangerous. She closed the door to her room and pulled out her phone. No way to call Kieran, no way to warn him. But maybe she didn't need to. Maybe all she needed was to record everything, to catch Vivian in the act, to make sure that when this was over, the truth was loud enough to drown out the lies. She opened her phone's voice recorder, hit record, and tucked it into her apron pocket. Then she sat down on the edge of her bed and waited. For the alarms, for the chaos, for the moment when everything would either fall into place or fall apart completely. The clock on her nightstand glowed. Jamun 47 a.m. 13 minutes until the alarms went off. 13 minutes until the world changed. McKenna took a deep breath and whispered a prayer her mother used to say. "Lord, if I'm walking into fire, let me come out stronger than the flames." Then she stood up and walked back into the hallway, because waiting wasn't going to save anyone. And if she was going down, she was going down fighting. The next hour crawled by like torture. McKenna drifted through the penthouse, playing the part of the night maid. Plumping pillows, straightening magazines, moving through rooms like a ghost. But her mind was loud. Vivian knew. Vivian was watching. Vivian had people everywhere. And Kieran was sitting in a motel room with a target on his back. The clock on the wall ticked forward. 1:50 a.m. 10 minutes. McKenna's pulse hammered in her ears. She moved toward Kieran's bedroom, her hands shaking, her breath shallow. She knocked softly. No answer. She pushed the door open. The room was empty. Her stomach dropped. Then she heard a voice behind her. "Looking for me?" She spun around. Kieran stood in the hallway, hoodie on, cap pulled low, backpack over his shoulder. He looked different, Smaller, human, like someone you'd pass on the street and never look at twice. Relief flooded through her. "It's time," she whispered. He nodded, his jaw tight. They stepped into the hallway together, moving quickly toward the service stairs. "The stairs by the laundry room," she reminded him in a low voice. "Down to the garage. Third car from the left. Keys under the mat. Don't turn your phone on until you're miles away." "And you?" he asked. "I go back. Upstairs," she said. "I play my part. I scream when I see you fall." Pain flickered across his face at the thought. "I'm sorry for putting that on you," he said. She shook her head. "You didn't. The world did. Vivian did. I'm just choosing what to do with it." A soft mechanical click echoed through the building. The system. Both of them froze. Seconds later, sirens began to wail. The fire alarm screamed alive, shrill and deafening. Lights flickered. Emergency strobes pulsed red and white through the hallways. Chaos. Staff doors flew open. Sleepy faces appeared, confused, panicked. "What's happening?" someone shouted. "Fire drill!" another voice yelled. "Go!" McKenna shouted over the noise, grabbing Kieran's arm. He didn't move. "Kieran, go!" she shouted again. He looked at her one last time, his eyes full of something she couldn't name. Then he leaned in and kissed her forehead. Quick, gentle, desperate. "Stay alive," he said. "You too," she whispered. He turned and ran toward the service stairs, disappearing into the chaos as staff members flooded the hallways. McKenna watched him go, her heart in her throat. Then she turned back toward the balcony floor. She had to sell this. Had to make Vivian believe the plan had worked. Had to scream loud enough that no one questioned what happened next. She moved through the crowd of confused staff, pushing toward the balcony hallway. The alarm screamed, the lights flickered, the storm outside roared, and then she saw him. A tall shadow moving through the chaos toward the glass balcony doors. Broad shoulders, dark jacket, rough, purposeful stride. Marcus. The man from Vivian's office. The man who was supposed to push Kieran off the balcony. He moved like he owned the night. McKenna's pulse kicked into overdrive. He thought Kieran was already on his way to the balcony. He didn't know the plan had changed, didn't know his target had already slipped out the back. Marcus reached the balcony doors and pushed them open, stepping out into the rain and wind. McKenna's mind raced. She had to follow him. Had to make sure he didn't realize Kieran was gone. Had to sell the illusion that something had happened. She moved closer, her phone recording in her apron pocket, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Marcus stood on the balcony, looking around, confusion creeping into his posture. No one was there. McKenna stepped out into the rain, her voice shaking. "Mr. Locke," she screamed, using the name like a weapon. "Sir, wait!" Marcus spun around, his eyes narrowing. "Where is he?" he growled. McKenna's phone buzzed in her pocket. "Vivian. Where are you? He's about to fall. Don't miss this." McKenna's lungs burned. She stood between a hired killer and a balcony with no billionaire on it. And she knew that whatever she said next would decide whether Kieran's fake death stayed fake or became very, very real. Marcus stepped closer, his face hard. "I said, where is he?" he repeated. McKenna's mind raced. She had to think, had to improvise, had to sell the biggest lie of her life. "He was just here," she said, her voice panicked. "I saw him. He came out here. He was leaning over the edge and then..." She stopped, stared at the empty balcony, let her face go pale, let her hands start shaking. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God, no." She rushed to the edge of the balcony and looked down, her scream tearing through the night. "He fell," she screamed. "He fell! Somebody help! He fell!" Marcus's face went white. He rushed to the edge and looked down, scanning the darkness below. Nothing. No body. No impact, no sign of anything. But in the chaos, in the rain, in the flashing lights and screaming alarms, it was impossible to see clearly. McKenna collapsed to her knees, sobbing, her hands covering her face. "I tried to stop him," she cried. "I tried to grab him, but he was too close to the edge. Oh God, oh God, oh God." Marcus stared at her, then at the edge, then back at the chaos inside. He pulled out his phone and dialed. "It's done," he said into the phone. "He's gone." A pause, then Vivian's voice, cold and satisfied. "Good. Get out of there. I'll handle the rest." The call ended. Marcus looked at McKenna one last time, then turned and disappeared back into the building. McKenna stayed on her knees, sobbing, her phone still recording in her pocket. She'd done it. She'd sold the lie. But as she knelt there in the rain, one thought pounded in her head louder than anything else. Vivian still thought Kieran was at that motel, and if McKenna didn't warn him soon, the man she'd just saved was going to die anyway. McKenna stayed on her knees in the rain, her sobs echoing across the balcony. Staff members rushed past her, shouting, panicking, trying to piece together what had happened. Vivian appeared at the balcony doors, her face a mask of calculated shock. "What happened?" she asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. McKenna turned to her, tears streaming down her face. "He was out here," she said, her voice breaking. "I tried to stop him, but he fell." Vivian's face crumpled in manufactured grief. She rushed forward and pulled McKenna into her arms. "You did exactly what you were supposed to do," Vivian whispered into her ear. McKenna's stomach twisted. Then she pulled back and looked Vivian dead in the eye. "I know," McKenna said quietly. Vivian's smile froze. McKenna reached into her apron pocket and pulled out her phone. "I recorded everything," she said. "Your conversation with Marcus, the plan, the timeline, all of it." The color drained from Vivian's face. "You're bluffing," Vivian hissed. McKenna pressed play. Vivian's voice filled the air, cold and clear. "At 2 a.m., the alarms trigger. Cameras go down. He goes to the balcony. You push. Clean. Simple." Staff members stopped moving. Security guards turned. Everyone listened. "And if that wasn't enough," McKenna continued, her voice steady now, "Kieran isn't dead. He's alive. Watching. Waiting, and about 30 seconds ago he sent this recording to the police, the press, and your entire board of directors." Vivian's eyes went wide with rage. "You little FBI, nobody move." Federal agents flooded the balcony, badges flashing. Kieran had called them from the motel the moment McKenna sent him the recording. Vivian's hands were yanked behind her back. Handcuffs clicked into place. "Vivian Cross, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder." Vivian's eyes locked on McKenna, cold and venomous. "You have no idea what you've done," she spat. "I do," McKenna said quietly. "I broke the cycle." Vivian was led away, screaming threats that dissolved into the rain. Marcus was caught in the garage trying to flee. 3 other conspirators were arrested within the hour. And then, through the chaos, McKenna saw him. Kieran. Standing at the balcony entrance, hoodie soaked, cap in his hands, eyes locked on hers. He walked toward her slowly, and when he reached her, he didn't say anything. He just pulled her into his arms. "You saved my life," he whispered. "You saved mine too," she replied. 3 months later. McKenna stood in front of a building in Atlanta. The sign above the door read, "Locke Foundation Community Health Center, reopened in memory of Grace Williams, her mother's name." In gold letters. Permanent. Kieran stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "She would have liked this," McKenna said softly. "She would have yelled at me for taking so long," Kieran replied. McKenna laughed, a real one. "What happens now?" she asked. Kieran looked at her, something warm in his eyes. "Now," he said, We make sure no one else's story ends the way ours almost did." She nodded, and together they walked through the doors, not as a billionaire and a maid, but as two people who'd faced the fire and chosen to walk out stronger than the flames. Some people step forward when everyone else steps back. If you've ever been that person, or wish you were, this story is for you. Don't let it end here. Share it. The end.